It's wonderful being here with you guys. As time goes on, we'll be using this site as a channel, a second channel, where we are going to be discussing about our African history. One thing I believe is that we know that we are using the media or Western tools to propagate our message about our history. But there is one thing that is mostly important, is to get this message across to our African brothers and sisters, for them to be aware of the history of their ancestors. I usually tell people that the only people in the world who don't know anything about their ancestors, which is also the reason why they usually demonize their African ancestors. The reason why I tell people this is that Africans are the only people who don't recognize their African ancestors. So you see this level of demonizing your ancestors and keep on making sure that anything that deals with your ancestors, anything that concerns your ancestors, you are not involved. As Black people, we have to understand that we are the only people in this world who don't know anything about our antiquity. Yes. Now, development of each society is built on the history, okay, on the customs and traditions of that society. The Chinese civilization is in accordance with the Chinese philosophy of life. What China is today is not alien. It is in line with their cultures and traditions. So, the development of a people should always be in line with their customs and traditions. Africans, we are not democratic people. The historical origin of the political system, irrespective of the fact that we were one of the first people in the world to practice democracy before ancient Greece, because definitely when you go to maybe you want to study some courses like political science or government. Now, when you go to the topic of democracy, there is a question they usually ask: which country in the world that started practicing democracy? They will tell you Athens. Athens is a city in Greece. Athens is a city in ancient Greece. So, in other words, the Greeks were the first people to start democracy, which is not true. Because by the time we study what we call the pre-colonial administration in Africa, we are going to come to the realization that the first people to practice democracy in the world were the Igbo people in Africa. Sorry, the Igbo people in West Africa. Because they were the people that practiced the highest level of democracy. The Yorubas were also one of the founding fathers of democracy. Because by the time we go into the pre-colonial administration, you will come to understand that before Europe came into existence, our African ancestors were having a democratic future, a democratic concept called separation of power. In Yoruba, the Alaafin was the executive organ of government. The Oyomesi, they are like the legislative assembly, while the Ogboni courts, they are like the judiciary. Then we have the Ariana Kakanfo, that is the military of the old Oyo Empire. So there was outright separation of power and checks and balances. And if you study these organs of government in the ancient old Oyo Empire, you come to understand that there was separation of powers, because the Alaafin is the person that implements the laws of the Oyo Mesi. The Alaafin is the executive commander-in-chief of the armed forces, which is the Ariana Kakanfo. Now, you have to understand one thing here, that the powers of the Alaafin is being checkmated by the Oyomesi. Okay, there are some Bashoru in Yoruba political settings, ancient political settings. We have what we call the Bashoru. The Bashoru is the head of the Oyomesi Council. Now, there are some greedy Bashori, selfish and mischievous Bashoru who want to take over the position of the Alaafin. They might lie that the gods have rejected the Alaafin, therefore the Alaafin must commit suicide, because that was the Yoruba tradition. When an Alaafin is being rejected by the gods, he must commit suicide. They will present a calabash to the Alaafin with a parrot or parrot egg, something like that. And once there is a parrot egg inside, the Alaafin, it simply means that the Alaafin has been rejected by the gods. So the powers of the Oyomesi was checked by the Bashoru. You know, the powers of the Alaafin is being checkmated by the by the Oyomesi. Then the powers of the what is it called? The Oyomesi is being checkmated by the powers of the Ogboni court. Now the Ogboni court, they have a leader called the Olowu. In the Ogboni court, which is the third organ of government in the old Oyo Empire political setting, the Ogboni court was like the judiciary that checkmates the power of the Bashoru, because there are some Bashoru that are very selfish and greedy. They always want to usurp power. So their powers will be checkmated by the Ogboni courts. So you see, there was the existence of separation of power in the pre-colonial African system, thousands of years before the Europeans were known in history. Yes. Talking about democracy, the first people to practice democracy in this world were the Igbo people. The Igbo people had what we call the acephalous system of government. The acephalous. Acephalous simply means headless, no head. Okay? No head. So, we have to understand that they had institutions. They had what we call the Umada, the Ozo title holders, the Ofo title holders. You understand? This is now the coming together of all these title holders and all these groups, like the age grade. The coming together of all these groups makes up what we call the village democracy or the village assembly. To tell you that the first people to practice democracy were the African peoples in West Africa, known as the Igbo people. Yes, Prosper, you're welcome. Thank you very much, Prosper. In Katan, Indifreke, you're welcome. Okay, so we are moving a little bit from TikTok to YouTube. Okay, so if this is the first time of coming, you're highly welcome. If this is your first time, so the essence of this page is to disseminate and propagate the history of our African ancestors. And when I started this class or this lecture, I made it known that the only people in this world who don't know their history are black people. They are the only people who don't know their history. Okay, now I need you guys to understand that whatever they say they have today started with us. And whatever they say that they taught us, they did not teach us. They were our students. And today, when they went back to Europe, when they went back to Rome, they went back to Greece, they became the father of this and the father of that, and they started establishing secret societies. Secret societies started from esoteric schools. And the first esoteric schools in the world were called the mystery schools or the mystery system, established first in places like Sudan, Ethiopia, and Egypt. Because our African ancestors, who were the first people that existed in this world, have already started the study of the universe. So we had mystery schools that will give you esoteric knowledge in ancient Africa. In other words, the first and the oldest university in the world were built in Africa. We have the Al-Kairouan University, established in Fars, Morocco, around 859 AD, thousands of years before Oxford and Cambridge. We have the Al Azhar University. These were universities that predated and preceded all the universities built in Europe. Of course, we know that these people were not educated, which was obviously true. If you are a good history student or if you love history, we know that these people are not true. Like, they were not civilized. We know they were not civilized because I need you guys to understand something here, that our African ancestors left North Africa, went to Europe, invaded, conquered, and colonized the Europeans. And guess what? They even ruled them for over 700 years. This was from 711 AD to 1492. They ruled the Europeans for over 700 years. They colonized the Europeans for over 700 years. Now, when they came to Europe, the Europeans were in their what will I call it? In their dark age. They were in their dark age. This was when they get severed. This was when they get this was where they had no science, no history, no civilization. They were backward. They were so retarded. These were people who bathed once a year, because the Catholic Church already told them that if you bathe regularly, you're going to have skin infection. Because the Catholic Church has told the Europeans in the medieval era that if they bathe regularly, they are going to have skin infection. The Europeans, they don't even have a public bathroom and public toilets in the medieval time. They were so backward, they don't even know how to read and write. It was Africans from Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt who came to these people and they taught them how to read and how to write. They taught them how to read and how to write. They don't even know how to bathe regularly. They bathe once a year. It was African ancestors who built over 600 public bathrooms for the Europeans. Are you aware that these people don't even know anything about education? They don't even have a university setting. Like the way we have modern university today, they don't have it. So because they never had it, our African ancestors who colonized them for over 700 years along the line built 17 universities for the Europeans, an extra university known as the University of Salamanca. University of Salamanca is the oldest university in the world. Is the oldest university in Europe, if not the first. Because from the look of scientific and archaeological and historical research, we discovered that the first university in Europe was called the University of Salamanca. Now, it was not just built by our African ancestors, it was also administered by our African ancestors. In other words, the heads, the top figures controlling and managing that university were black people. What I'm saying is that they were also the lecturers, they were also the teachers, telling you that our African ancestors taught the Europeans, where the Europeans in Europe sat on the feet of our African ancestors to study, to analyze how to establish a university system. And this was how they built the University of Oxford and Cambridge universities. See, there is something so special about black people, that when the Europeans, they see black people, there is something so special. See, there is something the Europeans, they know about us that we don't know about ourselves. There is something that the Europeans know about us that we don't know about ourselves.